Welcome back to Today Assets Report, the channel where we cut through the noise and bring you what actually matters in the world of finance and digital assets. If you've been watching this space for any amount of time, you know that every once in a while, something happens that completely stops you in your tracks. Not a rumor, not a Reddit post, not some anonymous account on Twitter claiming to have inside information. I'm talking about real, institutional, on-the-record statements that change the entire conversation. And folks, that moment is right now. Because while everybody and their grandmother is glued to Bitcoin hitting new all-time highs, and yes, it's exciting, I get it, something far more significant just happened quietly, almost like they didn't want you to notice. Wells Fargo's head of strategy just walked into Swift's own conference, stood at their podium, spoke into their microphone, and told the entire room that Ripple has options to replace the correspondent banking system. Not someday, not in theory, right now. That's not a crypto blogger saying it. That's one of America's biggest banks saying it to an audience full of global financial institutions. Let that sink in for a second. Voice. Now, before we go any further, I want to make sure you understand the significance of where this statement was made, because context here is everything. This wasn't some fringe fintech panel or a small crypto conference tucked away in a hotel ballroom. This was Swift's Sibos event, one of the most prestigious gatherings in global banking. The people in that room are not retail investors. They are not speculators. They are the decision makers at the largest financial institutions on the planet. These are the people who control trillions of dollars in cross-border payment flows every single day. And sitting right there among them, Wells Fargo's own head of strategy, Ira Williams III, stood up and said, and I want to be very precise here, that the old model of using nostro-vostro agreements and correspondent banking to move money across borders is changing fast. He said 20 years ago, that was the only way you thought about cross-border payments. And then he said it. Visa has products. Ripple has options. The old model no longer has a monopoly on how money moves around the world. That statement, at that venue, in front of that audience, is one of the most significant things to happen in the XRP ecosystem in years, and most people completely missed it. Voice. Let me tell you something about why the quiet nature of this announcement matters just as much as the announcement itself. When something this big gets said without a press release, without a headline blitz, without being pushed to the top of every financial newsfeed, that's intentional. Large institutions don't make accidental public statements at major international conferences. Every word that comes out of a senior executive's mouth at an event like Sibos is carefully considered. So when Wells Fargo's strategy chief name drops Ripple as an alternative to Swift's rails in front of Swift's own audience, and nobody in mainstream media runs with it, you have to ask yourself why. The answer, I believe, is that the traditional financial media ecosystem is not ready to explain this story to the general public, because the moment they do, the moment the average person on the street understands that one of the oldest, most entrenched systems in global finance is being quietly replaced, confidence in the current system starts to shake. So instead, it gets mentioned once in a conference room, and they hope most people are too distracted by Bitcoin's price to notice. We noticed. Voice. And it doesn't stop with Wells Fargo, because here's where the story gets even more compelling. Ripple Treasury has officially confirmed that they will be participating at Swift's Sibos 2026 event. Now, if you've been following XRP for any serious length of time, you already know why this is a jaw-dropping development. Ripple was essentially removed from the Sibos event back around 2016. They were pushed out. They were considered a disruptor, an outsider, a threat to the established order. And for years, that exclusion was used as a talking point against XRP, that the banks didn't want Ripple at the table. Well, folks, someone just handed them an engraved invitation. Ripple is not sneaking through a side door. They are not attending as a footnote in the schedule. They are presenting an alternative to Swift's payment infrastructure on Swift's own stage in front of over 10,000 participants, 500 speakers, and 200 major financial institutions. If that's not the most confident power move you've seen in this space, I genuinely don't know what is. That's not a company on the fringes. That's a company that's arrived. Voice. Now let's talk about the price targets, because this is where things get really interesting and where I think a lot of XRP investors are going to want to pay very close attention. Standard Chartered's Geoffrey Kendrick. And this man is not a random analyst. He is their global head of digital asset research, one of the most senior voices in institutional crypto analysis. He has publicly revised his XRP price targets. And when I say revised, I mean he has put specific numbers in writing, attached his name to them, and published them through one of the world's most respected banking institutions. Standard Chartered is calling for XRP to hit $280 this year, $7 in 2027, $12.60 in 2028, $19.60 in 2029, and $28 by 2030. These are not numbers from a YouTube channel. These are not numbers from an anonymous Twitter account. These are the published on-the-record price targets of a global banking institution. And for context, at a current price around $1.30, that $28 target represents a 21.5x return by 2030. Let that math sit with you for a moment. Voice. Now here's what makes those numbers even more striking when you zoom out and look at the broader framework Geoffrey Kendrick is working within. He's also publicly forecasted Bitcoin at $500,000 by 2030. That's roughly a 7.6x multiplier from where it sits today. He's calling for Ethereum at $40,000 by 2030, approximately a 20x multiplier from current levels. So when you line those numbers up side by side, something really interesting emerges. XRP's projected multiplier, 21.5x, actually outpaces both Bitcoin and Ethereum within Standard Chartered's own framework. And that's not some cherry-picked stat I'm throwing at you to hype up the chart. That's the math that falls directly out of the same analysts' projections for all three assets. XRP, according to Standard Chartered's own model, is expected to be the highest performing of the three. Now think about why that might be. Think about the utility. Think about Ripple's growing roster of institutional partners. Think about the NDAs, the regulatory clarity, the ETF conversations, the retirement account integrations that are coming. The math makes sense when you understand the use case. Voice. I want to take a moment here and talk about Palau, because I think this particular development is one that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The Palau Ministry of Finance just highlighted their ongoing partnership with Ripple in their latest official economic review. Phase 2 of their digital payment initiative using the XRP ledger has confirmed that the technology works at scale for a national payment system. Now, Palau is a unique case because they use the United States dollar as their national currency. They are not running some experimental token. They are running actual dollar-denominated transactions on XRP ledger infrastructure. And here's the thing I've been saying for a long time that I'll say again right now. When a country using the US dollar as its currency chooses to run its national payment rails on XRP ledger technology, that starts to sound less like a small island nation doing something quirky and more like a real-world testing ground for what a larger dollar-based system might eventually look like. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that one, but I think the implication is worth sitting with. Palau. Let's talk about what's really happening at a structural level, because I think this is the part of the story that even people who follow XRP closely sometimes miss. The old financial system, the one built on correspondent banking, Nostro Vostro accounts, and Swift's messaging network, is not going to collapse overnight. These things never do. What actually happens is a slow, deliberate, carefully managed transition. The institutions that control the current system are too smart to admit publicly that it's failing, because that admission alone would create panic. So instead, what you see is exactly what we're watching right now. You see executives at major banks quietly name-dropping alternatives at industry conferences. You see payment disruptors get invited back to the tables they were once excluded from. You see global banks publishing research with long-term price targets that only make sense if they believe significant adoption is coming. None of this happens by accident. This is the financial establishment slowly, methodically preparing the market for a transition they've already decided is inevitable. They're just trying to manage the timeline so it doesn't happen faster than they can control. Voice. And this is exactly why patience, real, disciplined, long-term patience, is the most undervalued skill in this entire asset class. I've been in this space for close to a decade. I've watched people buy XRP in 2017 and sell it in 2018 because they couldn't stomach the wait. I've watched people chase every memecoin pump and Bitcoin cycle while the infrastructure play they already owned sat in their wallet doing nothing. And every single time, without exception, The people who held through the noise, the people who understood what they owned and why they owned it, those are the people who came out on the other side of these cycles in a completely different financial position. The short-term price action is not the story. The short-term price action has never been the story with XRP. The story is the rails. The story is the infrastructure. The story is what happens when the world's financial system needs a bridge between the old way of moving money and whatever comes next. XRP was built specifically for that moment, and that moment, based on everything we are seeing right now, is no longer some distant hypothetical. Voice. I also want to address something I know some of you are thinking right now because I believe in being straight with this audience. Someone might say, look, we've heard big XRP predictions before. We've been through the cycles. We know what hype looks like. And that's a fair and healthy skepticism to have. But here's the distinction I want you to really internalize. There is a fundamental difference between a crypto influencer making a price prediction on social media and a globally recognized banking institution with regulatory obligations, with fiduciary responsibilities, with reputations on the line, publishing a formal research note with specific year-by-year price targets attached to an analyst's name and title. Standard Chartered is not a permable YouTube channel. They are one of the largest international banking groups in the world. When their global head of digital asset research puts $28 XRP in writing with his name on it, that carries weight that no amount of social media hype can replicate. That's institutional validation. That's the real thing. And it's happening right now in real time in front of the very banks that the old system was built to serve. Voice. Now let's connect a few more dots here, because the full picture is even more powerful than any single piece of it. You've got Wells Fargo publicly naming Ripple as a swift alternative at Sibos. You've got Ripple Treasury confirmed as a participant at Sibos 2026 for the first time in roughly a decade. You've got Standard Chartered publishing formal year-by-year XRP price targets through 2030 that imply a 21x return. You've got Palau running national payments on the XRP ledger and officially citing it in government economic reviews. You've got Ripple signing institutional partnerships at a pace that's accelerating, not slowing. And you've got the broader macro environment moving toward digital asset legitimacy, more ETF approvals, more index fund inclusions, more retirement account pathways opening up for crypto exposure. Each one of these developments standing alone would be noteworthy. Together, happening simultaneously, they represent something that is much harder to dismiss. This is convergence, real convergence, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It announces itself quietly, in conference rooms and research reports, while everyone else is looking somewhere else. Voice. Here's something else worth thinking about when it comes to the cross-border payments market specifically, because the scale of the opportunity XRP is positioned to address is genuinely difficult to wrap your head around. The global cross-border payments market processes tens of trillions of dollars annually. That's not a niche market. That's one of the largest, most consistently active financial verticals in existence. The inefficiencies in that system, the delays, the fees, the counterparty risks embedded in the Nostro Vostro model, cost financial institutions and their clients billions of dollars every single year. XRP and the XRP ledger were built from the ground up to solve exactly that problem. Faster settlement, lower cost. No need for pre-funded accounts sitting idle in foreign currencies. If XRP captures even a meaningful fraction of that cross-border payment flow, the math gets, as I've said before, almost difficult to comprehend at current prices. And the banks know this. They've known it for years. The question has always been when, not if. And based on what we're watching unfold right now, that when is getting a lot closer than most people realize. Voice. I also want to talk about something that gets said in this space a lot, but I think deserves to be said more carefully and more seriously, which is the idea that these opportunities have an expiration date. And I don't mean that in a fear-mongering way. I mean it in a purely mathematical, market structure way. Right now, XRP is accessible to retail investors at a price point that reflects a market that hasn't fully priced in what institutional adoption at scale actually looks like. Once the rails flip, and I mean truly flip, when Ripple's infrastructure becomes the standard for moving value across borders at a global level, the asset reprices to reflect that reality almost instantly. The window to accumulate at these levels does not stay open forever. The people who understood Bitcoin's infrastructure play in 2013 and 2014 didn't have the benefit of hindsight. They had to act on conviction. And the people who are watching XRP right now, reading Standard Chartered's research, watching Wells Fargo executives name Ripple at CBOs, watching entire countries adopt XRP ledger technology, those people have something the early Bitcoin adopters didn't have. They have the receipts. The evidence is already in front of you. Voice. Look, I've said this many times on this channel, and I'll keep saying it because it's true. The single hardest thing to do in this space is nothing. It sounds counterintuitive, but the discipline to accumulate your position, understand your thesis, and then sit on your hands while the world catches up to what you already know is something most people simply cannot do. They'll watch a red candle and panic. They'll watch Bitcoin make headlines and feel like they're missing something. They'll rotate out of their XRP position right before the moment it was always building toward. And I understand why. It's human nature. We're emotional creatures, and markets are designed to test your emotional limits. But the investors who are going to look back on this period in 4 years, when XRP is sitting at numbers that Standard Chartered's own research suggests are entirely realistic, those investors are the ones who found a way to separate their emotions from their conviction and just stayed the course. Whether you buy XRP at $1.30, $1.50, or even lower in the coming months, if the thesis is right and all the evidence we're seeing right now suggests it is, the entry price difference at these levels is almost irrelevant compared to where this is heading. Voice. So here's where we land today on Today Assets Report. Wells Fargo's head of strategy named Ripple as a direct alternative to Swift's correspondent banking model at Swift's own event. Ripple Treasury is attending SIBO's 2026 for the first time in approximately a decade, presenting their infrastructure to over 200 major global financial institutions. Standard Chartered's global head of digital asset research has published formal, written year-by-year XRP price targets through 2030 that imply a 21.5x return from today's prices, outpacing their own projections for both Bitcoin and Ethereum. Palau is running national payment infrastructure on the XRP ledger and citing it in official government economic reviews. And all of this is happening at the same time, quietly, while mainstream attention is focused somewhere else entirely. This is not hype. This is not speculation dressed up in institutional clothing. This is the actual, verifiable, on-the-record movement of the financial establishment toward the infrastructure that XRP was built to provide. The harvest isn't coming someday. The harvest is being planted right now in conference rooms and research reports and government economic reviews, and the people who are paying attention are the ones who are going to be ready when it arrives. Stay patient, stay informed, and as always, stay with Today Assets Report.